Okay, good evening, everybody. We'll call this special meeting of the Itasca County Board of Commissioners to order. It's Thursday, December 19th, 7 o'clock p.m. in the boardroom. The special meeting today is obviously about the jail and the project. We've got an agenda here. Again, it's going to be pretty flexible, as it'll just kind of flow together, I think, as we go through these items. I do ask of the public to try and refrain from commenting through the presentations, and we will allow time at the end for you to ask questions of these guys and of us. So if we can just kind of move through some of our presentations here, we'll move this along, and Ben will be joining us real soon, right now.
There we go. So one question, Mr. Chair, under number 5, payment options, will that also include potential paperwork that needs to be prepared for those options to incorporate that in there?
Discussion.
Okay.
All right, so with that, I think we'll ask Lucas to come forward and go ahead and start.
Board members, thanks for having me. At the last meeting, there's some,
Mic on. Is his mic on?
sounds like it's on from my end.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
All right. There was some questions asked and some general conversation at the last meeting. The board asked that I clarify some items and come up today, so here we are. The first thing I'd like to cover is, as soon as we got the sunset letter from the Department of Corrections, we in Itasca County established a criminal justice system assessments group that included judges, county attorneys, public defenders, state probation, and county probation. The focus of the group was, are there ways to make the system more efficient? Is there a way to cut jail days or sentence lengths or anything we could come up with? The one document from the jail side we were pushing really hard was called Swift Hope out of Hawaii. It basically dealt with dealing out sanctions and sentences faster and less time. I think we had a total of 4 or 5 meetings. Out of that, both state and county probation agreed to try that method. We saw drastic reductions in the length of time and the sentences from county probation. They work with a different sec population than the DOC does. It was easier to implement on their end. They shaved roughly 10 inmates in custody any given day off with the new thinking, the new process. What they basically changed, instead of giving probation violation people 30, 45, and 90 days, they went to 10, 15, 25 days. So they shortened the overall length of stay in custody, which dropped our bed numbers. The other thing the state did is they put in the pretrial evaluation form, which was mandated and vetted by the state, put that in place. The inmates that hit the criteria for the form, fill it out. It's provided to the judges at the first hearing. If the judge feels appropriate to ROR or set bail off the form, they do. We saw roughly a reduction of 4 or 5 with that form being put in place. The data I sent you guys on years from 1999 to now, you'll see there was a reduction in 2019 versus 18, 17, and 16. That reduction's a direct product of this group meeting and trying to figure out efficiencies. That was about the only efficiencies we could figure out and implement as the group. The next subject we had was bed space. Jail capacity is a combination of the average daily population, average length of stay, admissions rate, and 2 adjustment factors, peaking, which is the highest daily population, and classification. Peaking population is difficult because it is the highest day of the year. We've had years where we're at 139, 143, 136, but then you turn around in December and the highest population we might have for that month is 96. But you have to be able to project what the peak's going to be in the highest 3 or 4 months of the year, so we're not housing people out. The new DOC commissioner, when he got in office, stated he's going to cut prison beds by 20%. He did not tell anybody how he's going to manage to do this or what he has a plan for. But somebody who's been in this field for 20 years, that tells me Itasca County is going to get the brunt of 20% of the inmates we have in prison pushed back on the county. An example of that would be 2005 through 7, we had what was called short-term offenders. The DOC pushed any inmate who came from Itasca County to prison that had less than a year sat in Itasca County instead of sitting in prison. They paid us $11 a day per inmate. They put the full burden back on the county. Again, I do not know what the current commissioner has in mind, but it scares me anytime they say they're going to cut it by 20%.
So, Mr. Chair, not to interrupt, Lucas, but and I appreciate you're here tonight. So what you're saying is that's probably factored into the total bed space?
It is not.
It is not.
Factored
Okay.
into my growth, my
Okay.
average daily population, or anything else. It's just something to keep in mind
Okay, that's
when we're
okay.
talking bed
So we
space.
probably should have communication with the commissioner and just ask him bluntly what his plan is.
I can tell you what they've been doing with, they've put out there now, they would like to create what's called regional revocation centers for parolees. So instead of sending parolees sit in Itasca roughly 12 days, they have a parole hearing, they either go back to the street or they go back to prison. They're trying to sign contracts with local jails to create these revocation centers. The idea is a parolee will sit in that local jurisdiction for 45 days. They'll get CD treatment and cognitive treatment while they're in custody for 45 days, then return back to the community. They're willing to pay for those days in custody at the rate of $75 a day per inmate. The fear I have is nobody in northern Minnesota creates or volunteers to do a regional revocation center. Then they got to start getting creative on where they're going to put people. But so far, they're just sending out contracts and asking if anybody's interested.
Okay.
We'll cover that a little later as well. Incarceration rates just historically always go up. If you look from 1964 to today, it just goes up at a standard rate. We haven't seen a huge drop in incarceration rate in Itasca County. And that, it's done to many complicated factors within the criminal justice system itself. The next piece I was asked is staffing. We all know staffing is expensive. Building is not that expensive compared to staffing. And using the National Institute of Corrections on their capacity guide that I sent out to you guys, over a 30-year life cycle of a medium jail, which even a 200-bed jail is a medium jail. You got to be over 500 to be considered a large jail. The 30-year life cycle, 63% is staff, 10% is construction, 18% is maintenance, and 9% is inmate care. So staffing is very crucial, and I understand why you guys want numbers on staffing. Staffing in the current facility in the main jail is 1 to 25 because of linear design. The new facilities are direct supervision, which is 1 to 60. You have to have some classification abilities within there, so there are some indirect pods included, which would be 1 to 40. So realistically, if you're talking a 200-bed jail in Itasca, you're only talking 4 pods. 2 60-bed direct supervisions with 1 staff, and 2 40 beds indirect with 1 staff. Currently, by using the National Institute of Corrections staffing analysis, Itasca County Jail has 30 staff. By looking at the new design compared to our inefficient design, the DOC would only require between 6 and 8 new staff. So we double our beds, you don't double your staff due to the efficiencies of the new designs. And I still understand that staffing is the scariest part because of the money that's attached to the board. There's always the option if you open a 200-bed jail that you don't open one of the pods. You go for a year and see what your population is, how many bed space you've used, and by not opening one of the pods, you would save 5 staff out of the 6 to 8. So you'd only have to hire 2 or 3 potential new staff.
Question on that, Lucas. So when you say don't open a pod, how far do we have to take that pod into construction?
Well, if you ever want to open in the future, I'd say you build it all the way out through construction. You're not saving much money by not finishing the pod in construction. Like I said, 10% is construction over the 30 year of the facility. But if you don't open a pod, it's not like tomorrow we're housing out 75 inmates in Wright County. We can say, hey, magically, let's open the pod. The DOC will have to come up. They have to work with you guys, and it takes board action, the DOC approval to open a pod. So it's not something you can do. It's not a short, fast process.
Mr. Chair.
Terry.
So, Lucas, I have 2 questions. The one goes clear back to number 1, and it's kind of our beds. Is there any significance in sentenced versus unsentenced? And let's look at it in terms of right now, today, and then what it might look like in the future with the new facility. So part of the problem is that because of the way prisoners are classified, we're not able to use, I'm making this simple, we're not able to use all of the beds that you have, correct?
Saying it simply, yes.
Yeah. So those prisoners have to be housed out other places. So is there a significance between that, in terms of classification, a sentenced or an unsentenced prisoner?
There is 3 points in our classification system.
Okay.
So it's a 3-point box that you check.
All right. So there is a difference.
There is a
and they
difference.
can't
There
be
are
housed.
unsentenced people in min-security currently that meet the criteria. At 6 points or under gets min-security in Itasca County.
Okay. But my point is they don't get housed together.
No.
Okay. So again, talking about our efficiencies, and this kind of goes back to the last meeting that we had, is that, is there an area, is there ways that maybe we can work together with the courts and probation in terms of minimizing or maximizing, however you want to look at it, the sentenced versus unsentenced? And I'm thinking about continuations in court and all those things that add to the delay in the sentencing of an inmate.
I will say that was the primary conversation of the criminal justice group.
Okay.
The trend over the years was we always had commitments. Each judge had their own days. We had inmates reporting to the jail annex. The number of commitments is down by at least 80%. Most of our inmates are credit time served or have a very short sentence. That's a product of the overall system. I don't have much influence in that system, but even looking at some of them are, chemical dependency has taken over a big portion of my job along with mental health. So a lot of the inmates are sentenced to treatment. They will actually stay in custody until a treatment bed's available, and then they go to treatment.
Okay.
The way we handle inmates and try to stabilize them and return them to society has changed drastically in my 20 years.
So I'm just thinking, with these pods, and I want you to walk us through, that would be my second question here, walk us through these 200 beds and what does that look like to help us decide, or understand, is it 200 that's necessary, or what is it that we're, happy with, I guess. But so in the future then, we talked about currently how that does kind of interrupt the system a little bit, but in the future, how would a sentence versus an unsentenced look like in terms of numbers? Because you must know, percentage-wise what you have on the average in these pods then. Because if you can't put them together, if they're not be able to classify and go in the same pod, what does that look like for you? In the
Sentence and unsentenced can be together. Min security is very difficult to get to if you're not sentenced. General population is not.
Okay.
So we mix general population, sentenced and unsentenced. 90% of a jail population should be and is general population.
Okay.
So the two biggest pods that we look at are the 260 beds would be male and female general population. So they would be commingled.
Okay.
A sentenced and unsentenced, not the male and female.
So could you take us through the other 40, the two singular 40s that you talked about?
Yep. Now, you got to understand, some of this is just conceptualized in my head because we don't have a site. I don't have much to work with. So we're just looking at what would we use in Itasca for pods. So let's say the 40 bed. Your booking station is a post. So you'd have inmates who are getting processed. So they're in that room, they're on their post, and on the back side of their post, they also have pods that they're in charge of, indirect supervision. They have to go through every 30 minutes. One of the pods would be 18-bed male min security, which is about the average we have in the annex currently. So literally we'd take the 48-bed annex and shrink it to 18 beds because that's what we have. And the other side of that would be 18-bed special management, disciplinary seg, admin seg, anybody that's got to be housed away from others, there'd be 18 of those beds. So there's 36 right there. Well, they're still with the booking guy post, plus there's the cells in the booking that's getting processed.
Okay.
4 of those will be medical beds, so they can be watched all the time.
Gotcha.
So those are the 40 on that particular design concept I have in mind. The other 40 beds would include mental health, 10 beds, and then somewhere around 30, what we would call, it's an indirect supervision, but it's a multiple day room subdivision. So you can have 8 beds that are classified as special management female. You could have right next to it 10 beds that are classified min security female. So you could break up the classification, so there's a lot more walls and a lot more glass in that end, that design. But it allows you to divide them out.
Gives you more flexibility.
Yes, we try to build every pod in the new design. Back like when the annex was built, we didn't talk about classification, but nowadays if you built something like the annex, it'd be min only. You'd know that going in. So it takes out the ability to swing the cell or use any flex. So any of these cells that we're looking at could be swing cells. So that you got 18 DSEG unit and you want to make it 18 GP, we have the ability to swing them all. They're not, the way you design and build them now, you can swing each of them and change the classification as the needs change in the future.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, so we're back on staffing. So when you think of the 4 pods and you say, hey, can we cut this down to 160? Well, the special management, the admin SAG, it's a harder group of, they're more time intensive. Other counties don't like to take them in on bordering. They like to take GP, they'd prefer minimum security if you're willing to ship them, but GP is generally what Itasca County only ships. So you'd have to cut the GP beds. So you'd take the 260 bed pods and we could shave them to 30, we could shave them to 40 to get down to 160, but you're not shaving any staff. You're gonna have the exact same staff you would if you maximize the 1:60 or 1:40 ratio. And I stress that the staff is the expensive part here. 63% of the cost is staff.
So could you just restate that? So from where you currently are to 159 then would require how many staff? I mean, what's the threshold there? Because
There isn't a threshold. It goes by design of the pods, what you want to do
Okay.
for a post.
Okay.
So if you want to make it totally inefficient, we could do 1 staff to 10 inmates and have 40, 50 pods. I mean, I'm trying to maximize and get the most efficiency out of the design and what the DLC would allow, and that's 1:60 on direct supervision and 1:40 on indirect. So it only makes sense to me to maximize the 4 pods to the max, knowing we have a 6% increase. And if you build it at 150 or 140, we'll be opening at capacity just like St. Louis County did. We'll be shipping in a few years.
Okay.
Which I don't think is a great plan, but that's not up to me. We run through construction. Possible revenue sources was the last thing I was asked to talk about. There are possible revenue sources. St. Louis County houses inmates in 6 or 8 other places. They built their jail 190, knowing they had 200 and some inmates to start with. They're housing out the day they opened. They're as far down as Wright County for female beds. And the reason I know that is because Itasca County had females in Wright County and we're competing for those beds last summer. St. Louis, I know, would like to shave off some drive time. Beltrami County looks for female beds. Of course, we tell them we're shipping, so we're not even interested. Female bed seems to be the tough second, the northern part up here to get. If you had a 60-bed GP, we could house in some females. That's a flex number, but I'd say we'd be able to probably house in 20 any given day at $55 a person. Other revenue sources would be Net Lake used to house with us before our population got crazy. That'd be a federal source of income. We used to have 5 or 6 Net Lake people at all times. The state currently is looking for the regional revocation centers we discussed. They're willing to sign a contract for any amount of beds for $75 a day, as long as you meet the criteria in their contract, being the CD treatment inside your facility and the cognitive skills inside your facility.
Mr. Chair. Just a question for you, Luke. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to network with your colleagues from Carleton. I know they have a plan to become the regional center for female prisoners. With that, knowing that they're moving forward or their intent to move forward with that plan, how would that change would it or does it affect the numbers you described?
Potentially, it could deflect some of the St. Louis County numbers because they're closer to us than St. Louis, but their current jail design is 80. They're looking to do 80 beds because they're currently under 40. So they're doubling their facility. They'll be able to take some, but they won't be able to take all the beds we have. And the other thing you look at, Crow Wing County right now has a 60-bed direct supervision pod that is nothing but DOC. DOC is willing to contract with any jail who will take general population. We could fill a 60-bed pod tomorrow for a 1-year contract with the DOC. What else do we got on that one?
And what was it per day, Lucas, on the?
DLC will pay 55 for the general population.
Okay.
The Regional Revocation Center, because it requires more on our end of investment on the CD and stuff, is 75 a day.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's all I have for the board. Any other further questions?
Mr. Chair. Ben brings up a point here. I guess I want a little bit more talking about Carleton County. Now, they have a jail today of what size?
It's 38 to 42, somewhere in that ballpark.
And so they're only going to build a jail, another 40 beds?
They're going to double it.
So they're going to build 40 beds.
They're going to double their capacity, yes.
So a grand total of 80.
Yes.
Then they're going to take that 40 beds, they're going to make it all female? Possible?
Let me retract that. Their county board has not voted on what they're building yet or the size of their facility. Their jail administrator's plan is to ask for an 80-bed facility to double his population. They're at the same place. They're a little behind us, but they're close to where we're at in this same process.
Okay.
No, they would not make it all female because that wouldn't be conducive to their own business.
Okay. Because I have not heard that about Carleton County. Just wanted clarification.
Just want to add to what you told us here. I would like to start off by stating that putting housing revenue in a budget is a bad idea. So he's not advocating that we use these numbers to offset our budget, but this is just possible.
Correct. You never design a jail to make money. That's not what a jail is designed for. You design it for the future knowing you're going to have extra beds up front. You take the extra bed, you generate the revenue until your increase catches up with you. Now, what can we possibly generate in the first few years until our numbers start rising? Right around $1 million if we optimize the beds. But that revenue is going to go away as the 6% catches us, or trends from the state take place, we can lose that. So trying to put that into a budget's a bad idea.
So, you don't mind, so Lucas, so let's say the trends go the opposite way. We got to, let's say we, just for talk here, we have a 200-bed jail. We're in the 4th year of being open, and the trends are now to go to short-term, under 20 days in jail, and we're not filling our beds.
You have two options.
Is there other ways to fill our beds, be it federal, be it state stuff? I mean, you mentioned a little bit about feds too.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so not just Nat Lake. If Itasca wanted to, you could enter into a contract with the U.S. Marshals. You can enter into a contract with the Bureau of Prisons. I do DLC because that's what most of my cohorts in the area who have extra bed space, they contract with the Department of Corrections. But yes, there are. And there's always, let's say we come up with some drastic plan and all of a sudden rehabilitation takes place and we cut it in half. Then what do? We always have the ability to shut a pod down.
Okay.
I don't see that, but that is always a potential.
Okay. More questions for Lucas? Lucas, can you talk a little bit about 200 beds, but you can only maximize that X amount?
Approved versus operational capacity, correct. And that is due to the classification rule that's been put in place. So they try to keep about 20% of your facility open so you have the ability to move inmates around and classify them appropriately. So even out of the 200, you're talking 175 is full.
Is that, Mr. Chair, is that a suggestion or a rule, Lucas?
When they open the facility, they will dictate what the approved and the operational capacity are.
Okay.
The only thing we think in the future with classification's relatively new. It's been around for 10 years, but they've refined it a lot in the last 3 or 4. We're hoping that the numbers get closer to each other. As we learn how to use these tools and classify these inmates better, we shouldn't need the extra 20% at all times, would be my argument to the Department of Corrections. If we have 200 beds, we should be able to get much closer to that in the future.
One more question. What's the bare minimum? What's the bare minimum of beds?
Without giving me a set criteria on what you're asking, I could say
Well,
bare minimum could be
without all of a
100.
sudden going right back into shipping out prisoners to other counties and costing the same identical dollar.
I would say between 170 and 180.
Anything less than that, we'd still be looking at transferring.
There would be points throughout the year you'd be housing out. I'm not saying you'd be housing out every day like we do now, but there are the peak factors where we'd be housing out for 3-4 months a year.
And again, just to restate, that 170 or 180 would be the same amount of employees if it was 200.
We would be running the system less efficiently than we could, yes.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you.
We'll probably have you back up. Second item here is a project timeline, something that was brought up at the last meeting that we should get in. And Larry, do you want to help us out on that?
Thank you. I put the updated schedule together, not without some input. Kind of the basis of it was, where do we have to be come spring of next year if we want to break ground? And that was my starting point for developing the schedule. I took that point of starting construction in early April, connected with the architect, Klein McCarthy. They gave me a 9 to 11 month time frame for schematics, design development, and construction documents. In the schedule here, I am showing 11 because I do know that if the jail is downtown here next to the site, there's going to have to be programming in for courts and transportation into it. Standalone jail, probably could do in 9 months, they figure, but I know there's going to be a few other elements that are going to have to add to the design as far as how that connectivity and is going to flow for transport to courts. So if you take that date going backwards, you've got we got a bid opening, obviously bidding for a month. We got a 3-week window in there for the final plan review after the architect has the drawings completely, so we can go through and vet and make sure we dot all the i's and cross all the t's. You have the different segments of the design, and we get back to a point in time where some direction has to be given to the architect that we need to start schematic design. Here's the site, here's the location, this is what we want in it. Puts you about mid-February where we need to be at. Obviously, I'd like to see it earlier because I'd like to get into a bidding stage earlier in the winter. And then beyond that date, we did plug in week and a half for reviewing those bids, qualifying them, presenting the county board a budget and a recommendation on contracts award, and then just a couple weeks here to start mobilizing to the site and start construction, and then we got a construction window. I do show the DOC sunset date there of September 1st, 2020, where that kind of, or 2021, excuse me, where that falls in the overall scheme.
Larry, did you see the recent letter from DOC?
I did. I heard about it, but I did not see an actual written copy of it.
Lucas, with this timeline, are we going to be able to meet their demands?
The question he's asking is, can we have walls up by that date?
We start in the spring. By come September 1st, we would make sure you had walls up.
It's not just walls.
What's that?
As the email said, it's not just walls.
Got to be walls and working on the inside construction.
In one room.
It wasn't that specific.
Well, they need to be particular then.
You would not be totally enclosed if that's in that short time frame. I mean, there are some things, if we decide on a site that we can do some stuff this fall coming up, that's some site prep. Probably, depending on the type of construction, like to maybe bump some of those dates up if we got a decision here earlier, maybe an early bid package. But, I mean, I don't know if we want to be breaking ground in January. I think I would like to do is see where we've got in direction and start design, and then have that conversation with the Department of Corrections and Tim Thompson?
Yeah.
Yeah, and have that conversation with them, and then show him a milestone schedule of when we're going to start, when we got a bid opening, and say, here's our projection of where we're going to be at come September 1st.
So regardless, we're going to be lobbying. Bro,
Mr. Chair. There, I guess I want to add one deal onto your potential timeline here. I think that us commissioners need to know this and the general public. Come January 15th, we need to be down at the state of Minnesota handing in our paperwork for the option of doing a sales tax. It's just an option, but I think we probably better put it on because we missed that date line. You're into 2021 and we're in trouble. Has to be voted on in November of 2020, how people would like to pay for a jail, and be it property tax or be it a sales tax. So it's just a marker for more us than anything, but I think us needs to be aware, here's our date.
Okay.
okay, any other questions at this point on timeline?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Do we need to take action on this to set it up, or is this just anecdotal?
Yeah, anecdotal information.
So I just think too, talking about the timeline and the potential closeness to what DOC is going to consider acceptable and not acceptable. Maybe we could set up a meeting and have a couple commissioners there as well, Lucas and whoever else, and, we can just jointly show them the timeline and have conversation about it.
Mhm.
That possible?
Mr. Chair. Demolition can be done at any time.
Well, that's when I call, that's why some of the work happens this year. That's what I'm wondering, when a site is determined and what's going to be on that site, getting that site prep, infrastructure, some of those things stand alone from the core project.
We'll talk about site here in a second.
Any questions, feel free to call me up again.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Town Hall meetings. I'll start. I got all my feelers out. I don't have anything nailed down yet.
Mr. Chair, I have 3 meetings set up so far.
Okay.
If you want, I can tell you when. City of Warba, March 16th at 6 p.m. City of Coleraine, March 23rd at 3:30. And City of Bovee, April 1st at 5:30.
You will.
Mr. Chair, I have February 13th, Marcel, and Commissioner Danucci and I are going to work on a joint one that'll include Marcel and Big Fork, but we haven't got the time yet. So the question I have is that, again, in part of the transparency and letting people know, because we are very limited with our media sources, especially in our rural northern areas. The Herald Review doesn't cover that far north, and very few get the Eastern Itasca. So the Watts, which is the newsletter for the rural electric in Big Fork, they're willing to put the date and time, I should lean forward here, date and time of our meetings. So could we create an individual invitation that, we just put in a township and a time and a location that we could submit to them so that they could put it in for us? Okay. And then perhaps jointly, once we come up with that master list, we'll put something in the Herald Review and Eastern Itasca and, share it with the other media sources that we have.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have not reached out to my townships at this point in time, so I have nothing to offer here on dates and times, but I presume I'll have 2, if not 3, so.
Mr. Chair, I'm thinking it makes most sense for me to piggyback on city council meetings and township meetings. I'm also trying to get a sense of, will I have presentation materials? Will there be content, that it's new news, so to speak? So it'll probably be set up for the February timeframe.
Okay. Commissioner suggestions.
You want to go first?
So I think the first thing I think we need to do, and several of us have talked individually, but I think we need to create like an option A or B, 1 or 2, whatever you want to name it, from the suggested materials that the task force has provided to us, and then include anything that we might submit yet tonight. Back to Ben's comment, or Commissioner Danucci's comment, is that we really need to have, before we go out to these townships or cities, we have to have some material. We have to show them something. And with it, it has to have, a fairly accurate price tag. Otherwise, it's a moot point in having that discussion. So I'm offering that, maybe we have a couple of commissioners with Brett and we extract from what's been given to us and create an option A and option B and whatever else might be there, so that we do have something right away in January when we resume. And we would bring it to the first committee meeting that we have, so the public sees what it is and, it's, they understand what it is too. So I don't know if we need a motion or consensus, or, if that's, somebody else has any other ideas.
Mr. Chair, I think we need to look at those options, but we should also have those costed out and also looked at physically to see if it works as far as the total population that we're looking at. If it's 200 beds, we got to make sure that whatever site or option that is sketched out by whoever, that it can actually work, as far as that space is concerned. But we need to know the numbers too. Is it going to be X million, or, give us some information that way so we can at least look at the budgeting and financing of it.
Mr. Chair, so the old trails, or the old jail task force had a couple of options. One was downtown, one was green space. So some of that legwork is somewhat done. Wherever you put this, be it downtown or out or whatever it might be, there is some of that work is already done. They had a square footage of a jail. I think there can be some savings by possibly, on the size of a courtroom or size of a sheriff's department or whatever it might be that you're building. Some of that stuff has been kind of priced out per square footage already. So,
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner. I have that option's priced out. I think we have graphics on that. To tag along, I envision myself going to one of these meetings, showing that, and then showing a circle on a site plan and getting the question, well, how much does that option cost? I say, I don't know. And the residents say, well, come back when you do know. So we got to have some pricing info to be able to present. And it'd be nice if we could have some presentation materials to when we take this show on the road.
So part of why I asked Contegrity to come and listen to our conversation tonight, because we're going to float another option that maybe not had been looked at. They could jump on that right away and start trying to sketch that out, or work with the architect to sketch that out and start getting a cost using some of these other costs and put it together.
Yes.
So Mr. Chair, I've got a plan or whatever that I've been working on that I'd like to present to the board, and maybe Contegrity can also take a look at it, run some numbers on it, see if it makes any sense to them. I know they studied the west option, but if it would please the board, I could share this with you and with Contegrity and just give you an idea of what I'm thinking here on this one.
You have a copy for them then?
Yeah.
And also, as the board narrows it, as Ben said, if you guys need visuals, PowerPoints, things we can develop that you guys can take out that shows where we're currently at, so you're all delivering the same message. We would help in developing the PowerPoint and whatever price sheets and stuff you need to present to the public.
Appreciate that.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, what I'm proposing here is a vacation of First Avenue between the fire station and the courthouse. And I want to lay this out in two options because I'd like to at least cost it out to see what it's going to cost. Now, we had numerous discussions in regards to parking in the area, and there's some debate as to whether or not we need more parking. But in a lot of the cases we looked at buying other properties to deal with the parking issue, whether it be the Atchison block or some of the other blocks, which took real estate off the market and reduce, it was a cost plus a loss of tax revenue. What I'm suggesting is two options in my plan. One is to have a below-ground parking garage that would have, and this would be something that Contiguity would have to help us with, how many spaces they could gain by a garage underneath the facility. The second option I would like to have is the same layout, but without the parking garage. So that'll give us an idea of what those two costs are and whether or not we want to move forward with additional parking. This plan would also allow the east parking lot to remain as is. We don't have to deal with the creek. We don't have to deal with moving out the veteran service and the generator and all those things. Those parking spaces can be retained. The other part of this concept is that we could also use in my suggestion, we could use the minimum security building, continue to keep that lower level as minimum security as an option. We may not need it, but it would also be possible for future expansion if necessary. But what I would advocate for is also designing this and costing it out where we would build floors 2 and 3, but we would have a courtroom on each floor. I believe there'd be plenty of space for the courtroom on each floor. So a courtroom on second floor, courtroom on third floor. And then we could remodel the third floor of the existing courthouse for the other 2 courtrooms, which should address the needs of the courts in regards to having 4 courtrooms. And there may be space for other ancillary rooms, whether it be for offices on each of those levels or things that they may need, hearing rooms and things like that. So that would be part of my presentation, would be to deal with the jail and to see if, first of all, how many parking spaces we can get, to see if it fits a 200-bed jail, but also to take care of the needs of the courts. And it would also allow us to retain the current law enforcement center, the probation, the attorneys, and all of those departments would not have to be changed or moved, or, they would be adequate. Again, the bottom floor of the annex could be used for offices or other needs, but it could also, I think, be used in the future if DOC allows it to be used for expansion beyond the 200 beds if necessary, or even to be hired out to fill from other counties. And that's the concept that I'm suggesting.
Question, Mr. Chair. So Leo, if I'm understanding this, what I'm looking at here right now, there's first level, let's call it, or jail level. Your suggestion there'll be a second and a third floor on top of this?
No.
No,
I'm suggesting-
not in the blue area. So
Not in the blue area. The blue area
that would be in the,
blue area would be the jail with potential parking, garage level, below level parking in that facility.
underground park.
It could be, but it could be both ways. It could be underground parking or no parking,
Okay,
depending upon what the costs are, because maybe the parking is prohibitively expensive and we don't want to go that route. But if we do need parking spaces, that would provide an option to,
so floor number 2 and number 3 you just mentioned, that'd be strictly over the
just over the annex,
annexed area.
which was designed to go 2 floors, 2 more floors.
And that could be used for courtrooms or office space or something like that.
That's my suggestion. Yes, sir.
Terry?
Thank you. And we've also, I'd just say Commissioner Danucci and I worked on a plan which is very similar to Commissioner Trunt's, and that's the kind of slightly different colored, but it's got the ownerships on the map. And if you look at the hashed area, this is what we're referencing. Kind of the same concept. We would go west. There'd be a vacation of First Street, and there's been discussion with the city. There is willingness for that to happen. Discussion about the parking, and because it falls within the downtown business district, there's not a mandate for any additional parking. I think if we police ourselves and find the right number for county vehicles in our east lot, and we look at who else might be parking there, I think we can facilitate that quite easily. But again, it's the squareness that provides the square footage. Our plan would be basically the same thing, other than it would incorporate the annex, and there would be a remodel of the annex that would flow into the new construction, and potentially could be a second or a third floor, which would address an arraignment court or whatever the court is, because I'm not positive on exactly what it is that the judicial needs, but also address, because it would be adjoining our current facility, it would address those security issues that are really necessary. So Part of the thought process would be that, I apologize here, I'm looking at my notes, is that, if you bring us back to what the original ask was, and that is, we know that our current facility has a sunset. And so we were, plagued with the issue of, do you remodel it? What do you do with it? Do you find another area? So again, I just bring myself back to our main purpose is to build a jail. And it's nice that everybody joined in and provided input. But again, our main purpose is to build a jail. I'm concerned because our courthouse, if it were to go someplace other than here, and again, I think we need to, fit the square footage, look at the numbers, and if it isn't prudent, then I'll be the first to admit we need to look at another option. But, the benefits is that we keep our courthouse intact. We have a nice courthouse. It's structurally sound. There are very few deficiencies with it, and everybody knows what it is. We work very hard to keep our departments that fall under the roof of this courthouse here and make them efficient. And my fear is that as we fragment the services or the departments in this courthouse, we become way less efficient. And that's a big concern because we've worked very hard to get to the point that we're at. Our county system is a good system. We work well together, and it, as you look, you can see how one department works off of the other, and they complement each other. If you look outside of the courthouse, you see many businesses that over the course of 3 decades, 4 decades, have chose to locate close to the courthouse because they do business in the courthouse. And so again, these are all just points that I look at that are really meaningful that would make me want to look at an option that could be close to this courthouse, one side or the other, but yet keep us downtown. And the biggest concern is that if we look at a plan that is away from this facility, that's okay, but we haven't addressed what happens to the space that we vacate here. And an example, if we do create a judicial complex, and it includes the 9th District Court, our court administration, our probation, and all the things that have to go with them, we have a lot of vacated space, and there's no plan that addresses how we're going to tear it down, remodel it, and certainly there's not a price tag on it or how we're going to pay for that too. So those are just some concerns that I have. And so I'm asking the board for consideration to move the plan forward to Integrity to try to, look at the space. Again, I think we have to wrestle the fact of, how many beds is it going to be, because that will adjust the size, probably not significantly, but enough. So Ben, anything you want to add to this? Or?
Yeah, so Terry's touched on the key points that we developed in the legwork we've completed. The underground parking option, we'd like to see that broken out. We'd like to understand, the cost involved with that, because as we've come to find out that being in the downtown business district, additional parking is not required. Moving up to the footprint of the next space, it comes down to that footprint, working with our consultants and Lucas to see how we can best maximize that raw space, as well as the areas we've identified for, what we would propose to identify for remodel, including the annex, including the space above the annex. So that's gonna take some work to plan, space plan, see those adjacencies. And it's also an opportunity to work on processes between departments here at the courthouse. And we also recognize and hear the voice of the judges. Judge McBroom is in the audience tonight. We acknowledge that there is opportunity to improve those spaces. We take that into consideration. And I think that while there may be some new construction opportunities, we would also have remodel opportunities with existing space once we understand what those requirements are, what the guidelines for the requirements are, and what those costs are. So we'd like to identify that as well. So yes, we would be asking the board for approval to move forward with our consultants developing the scope of work that we've described and putting numbers to it. I think as well as the ability to negotiate with the property owners in the area identified.
So last week, I was down at the AMC conference and Contiguity Group was there as vendors. Klein McCarthy was there, the architects. I visited with them. Ben, you were in on one of the visitations. And what I took away on some of that was the cost of building downtown. What drove the cost up was acquiring properties. So as we looked east and north and some of these, and Leo, you mentioned it about the tax value going west. And if we have an option there now that we weren't aware of, right now, if I look at these two plans, the only difference I see here is the potential cost of the North Print building, Miners building, versus the cost of the fire hall and what that would take to acquire that piece. And I don't think it's within our scope to nail that down 100%. I think we can take these, give that to those guys and have them tweak it. Whether it's the south half of the block or the north or the east half of the block, it shouldn't really matter to us.
What can we
as
do?
long as that, what you guys said, the space meets in there. Larry, can you come up and talk a little bit about the spatial needs of the county and some of the work you did there with the different departments?
Well, that was actually Klein McCarthy, the architect, who did meet with all the departments and did the
Oh,
space
okay.
needs analysis in their report. So, I'm sorry, I can't answer a lot other than I do know they extensively visited with each department, went through their staff needs, which is a starting process of any design. I mean, until they start to put lines on paper where they start to define and get down, and sometimes you see those numbers grow or shrink accordingly depending on actual needs or more budgets. A lot of times will drive that, maybe it's a 10 by 10 office and not the 12 by 12 office that they wanted, and you work that around. But no, both these plans, did the question is, would the city allow the shutdown of the alley? For example, in both plans, the alleyway is,
Yes.
okay.
Where will this, right? I do have some questions for Mr. Chair.
Okay, Burl?
So, Mr. Chair, first off, be it Terry or Ben, do you plan to put a second and third floor over the annex area in this idea?
Well, again, it goes back to,
Or is it just all one?
We need somebody to put the footprint in the potential area.
Okay, so you're not sold on a second or third floor. Here's the area, give it to Larry, see what they can work out. That's the concept right now?
Kind of the concept, but again, I'm very cognizant of the needs of our judicial and understand that there are some serious security issues that need to be addressed. So I am in favor of, if we have to do a second floor on the annex and that facilitates maybe
just
another
curious.
courtroom or whatever it might be, or, jury area or whatever it might be, we need to look at that all inclusively.
Okay.
And so to say that we know, we don't know. We
Okay.
just know that
Well,
we
I
have a
just-
concept and we have an area to build that concept
Sure.
into.
Well, Leo's concept, he had kind of a second and a third floor
Yep.
in his mind already that needs to be added over the annex to do, be it offices or courts. And you're not doing that, you're just saying, here's our area. Ben mentioned, do one number with underground, do one number without underground. Tell me what can fit on this area.
Yeah.
Now, where are the cops gonna where the city cop's gonna park if I'm taking the whole,
So again, Commissioner, this is a conceptual
just an
area.
idea. Okay.
And all we did was take this into our mapping department to keep costs down, just to show people what we're talking about. I do believe that there probably would be, if you look in that top left corner, which is the east side of the city hall, and that is where the police officer, the city police park, that, you know, there might be just a small piece of area that they would park. They're definitely going to need some parking there. So again, it's not a detailed, to scale map. It's just, again, a concept and what can we fit in that area.
Mr. Chair. I have a question for Mr. Filippi regarding comments on the space planning work that's been done by Klein McCarthy. That database of information can be drawn upon, correct? That's to be used to plug into a different footprint or a different design.
Yes, because they did, like for on the jail, they sized the space needs analysis based on, I believe it was a 200-bed jail. So your square footage, I think, is 75,000 square feet total building. That's that and the mezzanine combined, so.
So that's work that's already been completed that is useful to us moving
It's taking
forward
those
with
pieces, yes. It's not a
other
wasted
options.
effort. It has to be done, and it actually, looking at the second floor of the annex, if it's potentially on courts, part of that legwork is done as well.
Okay.
Yeah. I think
I just wanted to
it
make
can
that
be
point.
stitched into wherever you would like.
So it doesn't have to be revisited, but
No, that legwork is done.
Let me catch the judge before she leaves. Judge McBroom? Yes. Can I ask you a question? Do you want to come forward? I'll catch you with a question here. So last week, talking with the consultants, one idea that was floated, and I'm just going to run this by and you can talk with the other judges, but if there's this need for a fourth courtroom and a fourth judge, what some districts have done is put in a first appearance court
Right.
that can be used. Is that an option for us? Does that work, or?
A first appearance court as adding for the fourth courtroom?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that offers you some flexibility. We have lots of hearings where there are simply two parties in the courtroom and not the volume. The high volume arraignment calendars are really where we need a lot of space, and I think that the judges could probably be flexible. The pattern has been we have our own dedicated courtrooms, but I think that with the idea of an arraignment court and a larger one, is that we would be flexible, and then whichever judge is presiding over that high-volume court could be using that courtroom that day. And then if we were lucky enough to get a fourth judge, which would just, I think, be of service to the public because it would cut down on wait times. It would address some of these, waiting for sentencing issues, just because we'd be able to run more efficient or have more court calendars and where we could see more people and get people in and out, that arraignment calendar could be used by a fourth judge. And then we'd be flexible because all of us run an arraignment calendar, but we could go into that fourth courtroom. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
So again, like you said, there's a lot of data there to build off of, and there's some work in there also that showed us if this is vacated, here's another department that could come in, and so I'm sure they can pull this together for us pretty quick and giving them some idea of a footprint.
Scope of work.
Mr. Chair, can I just do some things that are important to me, throw it out here in this area where we're talking about jail facilities and options and so on and so forth, if you don't mind? Okay. So for some of the commissions and some of the public here, a little back history, the task force, 10 months of meetings, things we've worked on. We did look at the west side over here, west of the building. We looked at in the parking lot. We looked at the east of the parking lot, including the two blocks of say Atchison's, and I'll call it Helen's Air Espresso. We looked at the block north of the courthouse here. We looked at land down by Target, that big empty field. went to the city, to Grand Rapids City. They were in our meetings. Basically asked Grand Rapids about their land, industrial land that they own. Just so everybody understands, they were not interested in selling us any land at that time. So once we were told that, we broadened our scope a little bit of other land. We took in and we looked at the old Rainbow Hotel property. We looked at the Cohasset Industrial Park, Harris Township, Old Potlatch, land up by the nursing home. There's a couple of chunks of land over by the airport, one over by Swan Machine. Looked at Hawkinson's Pit over by Walmart. So we did kind of a little, and you can, in your pamphlet, you should be able to see some of the dollar figures that, you know, so if you guys want to know exactly, hey, what did the, you know, what is Atchison's, you know, block valued at, and so on and so forth. I mean, you all can see that. And so the other thing is, you know, we've already talked about ideas how to pay for this facility. You know, one's countywide sales tax, the other one's property tax. And that's, so the space analysis was done for the concept of if a government building is built where the courts and the jails leave this building, what do you do with all the old space that we had? And that's where, as you would read, where the idea of taking Health and Human Services and moving them down here. They would have gained about 8,000 square feet, give or take. I don't think I'm too far off on that one, Larry. No, I'm not. Okay. You didn't go like this or like that. So, yes, we would need remodeling in this facility. We'd probably need to fix a roof. We need to do better with bathrooms and power and security and Wi-Fi and phones and all of that to fit anybody in. I know one of the biggest things the city was worried about, you know, losing population that would be working in this building. Well, if Health and Human Services moved here, that you wouldn't lose any, but I just throw that at you. Ideas of consolidation. I personally don't think that the Health and Human Services building or the old Pomida building is worth much money. If I use the what Kmart sold for or what the old lumber yards sold for right here in town, it just didn't bring much money. The Pomida building, you can hardly see it from the main drag. So my gut tells me to hang on to that building and reutilize it. Did get a brand new roof and an HVAC unit here in the last 2 years. What I do think has value to be able to sell, which could help offset the sale of this jail or the price of this jail, would be so the land department. I think the land department could move from where they're at, move into the old Pomida building. I think that the sheriff's building up here by the old North Side Lumber, that land has some value. Be a prime spot for someone to do multi-family housing or something along that line. Could be assisted housing, could be, I don't know, 55 plus housing, could be a lot of things there. I think that this red building over here behind the Holiday Station is worthy of a dollar. You know, you got a 30 by 40 shed right in downtown Grand Rapids. I think that has some value. And then the other thing I'll throw at you somehow to bring the money down on our taxpayers would be, you know, we have 300,000 acres of tax forfeited land here in this town or in this county. I think that possibly some acreage of that could be sold to help lower our costs to our people. The if we only build a jail, and I think Lucas kind of said it best. If we only just build a jail, and I'm glad to see that you gentlemen, you know, your ideas is connected, because the real savings comes to connecting to a courthouse. If you just have a jail out in wherever you have it, there is no savings, I guess. So I'm good to hear that. Some of the wishes that I have that we think about when we build this, and Larry, smart building. I mean, I gotta have energy efficiency. I gotta have automation, building automation put into place, be it water, lights, sewer, heat, you know, security system, you understand, safety inside, outside, ADA everywhere. I meant that's one of the things that the judges had problems with too. You know, we must have the capability of adding on. These two ideas here might be challenging to add on. We better figure out, hey, look, in 10 years from now, we need to add on. We better have thought that out already and had the plumbing and the chases there so we can go up the floor, because you're not going east, west, or north in these designs or this area. So we got to go up. So we got to think about that going forward. And then, you know, I say it's a 50-year building. You know, experts would probably tell me be happy with the 30-year building. But I think we should probably build for the long haul, not for a 10-year fix. Now, personally, I don't care where we build. If we build downtown, be it on the west side, east side, if you go green space, if you go to Cohasset or La Prairie or any of that, you know, leaving the city boundaries will throw a couple monkey wrenches into, especially if you move the courts. You know, it's the city or the county seat would have to move with it. So that adds a whole nother layer of problematic. So if we could stay within the city limits would be best. One of my big concerns about your guys' ideas here is I have a hard time understanding if the city or the people of our area are okay with a jail on the most heavily used intersection of Grand Rapids in our county. That's the only real concern I think we have here with this, or one of your biggest concerns, I will say, you will have with the general public and the business public, so on and so forth. I do not know how they'll react. I'm kind of semi-surprised that the city would be okie dokie with it. So that's not saying that this is a bad idea. I think you should price these out. Let's see what they come back as. Do your job and tell us what it is. I think I would probably make sure your option B that was drawn over here already once on the east side of this building. You know, with talking to people of the general public, we talked about the creek. I know the city's got a big problem with the creek, but Manor's house is built on top of it. With talking with Mr. Casper, you know, earlier in the week, I'll tell you that he's fixed a house that's built on top of it. So I have a hard time believing what's the big deal. And it's in a pipe. It could be moved if needed, if we had to rethink about building on the east side of town, or east side of this building too. I don't think there should be any obstacles that is thrown at us at this point in time. And I think the city should be a partner with us when it comes to that. If we say we got to move it, and they can figure out how it gets moved. So I guess I've had my piece. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Terry, earlier you said, you know, we should nail down some options. Well, we do have a green space option, and it really doesn't matter where it goes. It's going to be about the same cost, give or take the cost of a piece of land. Like Burl said, we do have some options that could be tweaked one way or another, going east of the courthouse, and that's somewhat costed out. pretty neutral with green space. And again, it comes down to price of the land. I think this would be a third option going
Yep.
to the west.
Yep.
And a couple things here. We got consensus then from the board to allow those guys to do some design work around with these two or blend the two or whatever, do some work going this direction.
I do.
Okay?
Yeah.
How are we going to come to a consensus on number of beds? We've heard some compelling arguments tonight from our sergeant.
David,
Yeah.
can I add something at that point?
Yep.
When Lucas talks about the design and the needs that we have going down the road, I would ask the board or implore on the board that in the very beginning of this entire process, it was started out as a sunset notice on our jail. We had to look at a correctional facility and we needed to make corrections that have been kind of kicked down the road for quite a while. The ratios of growth have all held true from what Maduri planned in 2007. It's been pretty much on target, that 6% increase since that timeframe. What I'm asking the board to do as you consider these, regardless of where it's at, I don't care, green space, next door, build another floor. Keep in mind that Lucas, through working with the DOC and the planning and the ratios and where we're headed with the laws, stay true to the correctional plan. I sympathize with the judges. I sympathize with what the county may have to do around it. But my obligation has to be is correcting this correctional need. So when we do start to look at floor pans, moving it, if we go this way towards the North Brent building, whatever we're going to do, have people move rivers. But I need you to stay true to what plans are involved in the square footage of that correctional facility. Because we need to address that need. That's our overrun. That's our security risk. That's our exposure. That's our liability. And we can't shortchange the portions of this that are a jail. When we started out that task force, it started out as a jail task force and quickly developed into a facilities concept task force. And really my concern has to be maintaining that you guys implore with you to stay on track with the correctional needs, because that's what we need to fix. The other things we can do and build in some plans to try to address those needs, like I've heard all of you talk about, we're not going to forget about them. But I don't want to do that at the cost of shortchanging what we need to correct in the jail.
And I would just piggyback off of that, Sheriff, and say what I said earlier. I think our focus here needs to be budget and where we're going to put this. And how that design fits, that's up to all you guys to get that put together. But as long as the needs are within the footprint in our budget, we should be good at that point.
Mr. Chair.
With direction along the way.
Yeah.
First Ben and you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To answer your question, I think after the options are costed out, the space will determine number of beds. The cost will determine number of beds, and we need to have that information back to be able to come to consensus on that issue. If we're saying, okay, here are the constraints, here's the footprints, here's the footprint, option A, option B. Leave it to our consultants to, okay, say, can we fit 200 beds in that footprint? Here's what it costs. Can we fit 160 in? Yes or no? Here's what it costs. And then when we have that in front of us, we can have a discussion about it and move forward. And just, to follow up, this is an opportunity through phasing or remodel using the capital improvement plan to make security upgrades in the courtroom. There are options. There are things to look at. But clearly, we have been requested to address the jail situation, and that is the priority. And I think we can come up with strategies that happen upfront or down the road or phased in. The timeline is communicated to address the other concerns.
Well, just like Lucas stated, one pod maybe stays empty, and that's a phase until Terry.
Thank you. And I totally agree with Commissioner DiNucci. I mean, that's a very fair way to look at it. The only thing I thought as we are asking for maybe the parking to be looked at independently from the actual square footage so that we know the cost, the difference in cost, maybe you look at if it can be done without a lot of work and a lot of cost, but what does a 180 bed facility look like, square foot? And what is the cost reduction of that versus the 200? And again, I think Ben is absolutely right. I think the footprint is going to dictate, what we're going to be able to get in there. If it's 200, then, maybe we look at what is the cost of 180. If it's a reduction of that much, it might give us an idea what we want to do with it, So I just say that, if there's any possible way to look at how much does a footprint shrink between the 160, 180, and 200, and what are the cost increments as you go up? I don't think it would take a lot of work for that, but maybe throw that in there as well, besides the other options that we've thrown here.
And at that point, it's all brick and mortar, because
It
we've
is.
already heard
Yep.
that it's
We know the
staffing.
staffing will pretty much be the same, so it's what do you save in your construction, correct?
Mr. Chair, I think we just need to be clear in communicating our desire for the scope of the work and what we want to see as far as alternates.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
just a question to Contegrity, I guess, is when would they think that they could get those numbers, schematic drawings or whatever, to us? Would they be able to do it in the next few weeks, or how long would that take? Cost estimates.
I'd like to have a chance to reach out to Scott with Klein McCarthy as far as laying out some of these plans. So if I can reserve that comment until I have a chance to probably talk to him tomorrow and send him these and have that conversation. Putting numbers is not going to be very difficult, because we already submitted numbers on a cost per square foot basis, and we didn't differentiate between whether it was built here or built out there. It was the ancillary space around or the property acquisition that I guess I would look to you to help, or what's it going to cost to purchase these.
yeah.
I can come up with a demo cost of the building, but the actual purchase acquisition costs I would not be able to.
Okay.
And then if we did have questions, if we channel them through Lucas or through Brett, or as far as some insight on maybe some thoughts on this.
Yep.
To answer your question on number of beds, I think you start back with the space analysis. Going from a 60-bed pod, if you look at the space analysis that Klein McCarthy did, to a 40-bed pod, there's not a huge difference in square footage, which is going to be driving our cost or our budget at this point. So the area-wise, I think we start with the 200 and see if we can make it fit. Also look at the option is, can we get into the first floor annex and use that space, or the lower level, let alone the second floor or possible third floor. So there's some areas there, but you're at almost a 75,000 square foot jail. Within that 75,000 square foot space needs, there was 3,500 square foot arraignment court. So that takes away a little bit of your footprint if you can pull that into above the annex. So, and with it, we want to look at expansion space. Where's your growth at 20 years down the road? So if you work in growth, some of your core elements, such as your food service, your laundry, your Sally Port, those are designed around a potentially bigger facility. It's so that when you add on 20 years from now another 40 beds or 60 beds, that your food service, for example, can handle it, or your laundry or your storage, or some of those core elements are designed around a larger master plan. So I think having an idea what direction you could go, looking at these two plans, if the property could that be your expansion? If you marry the two plans together, do you build this one and use that as your expansion west, if that's a possibility? But lots of things to consider, but putting the numbers together won't be very difficult. It's a matter of what square footage is going to be in there and what that scope is going to be, I think, on the remodel side.
Okay.
Good enough.
Mr. Chair, so we had kind of roughly the 2nd and the 16th coming up in January.
Can I get back I'll send it, I'll talk to Scott tomorrow, and I'll update Brett, and Brett and Lucas, and they can circulate that, what we're looking for.
Are we still on for those 2 dates?
Yeah.
We are. So you think you can get something done?
What was the dates?
The 2nd of January and the 16th?
First and third Thursdays we meet.
Yeah. I mean,
I know what square footage we're dealing with. Yeah, I mean, plugging them in is not an overwhelming effort. It's what we're going to go back into as far as that renovation side of it and what square footage am I working with.
I would say by the 16th for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. You
You're gonna lose a good week here.
get done by the 16th.
Yes, I don't see that being an issue. At least seeing what can fit here.
Right.
And with that, we can put some numbers to it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Number 5, payment options. I think we kind of walked through this as Burl was talking. This line item here, or this agenda item, Brett asked that board directs the administrator and the auditor to apply for the paperwork so that sales tax option could be an option. Still has to be voted on by the public, but like you stated before, if we don't get this in by the 15th, there is no option there. And as we're going through all these options, this is part of our package to weigh out all the different options. So just to allow that to move forward.
Do you need a motion at that point in time, or
Probably.
you do?
I think the RVA has it listed, the language that
Direct county auditor treasurer to submit necessary paperwork to ensure the sales tax option is available at the 2020 general election.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we direct our county auditor, treasurer, and Mr. Skiles to fill out the proper paperwork and get it down to the city for a sales tax option.
Do we have a second?
Second that, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Ben?
Yeah, this, this motion, taking action on this item of business, it's not a decision. But in looking at all the options, we need to make sure we have the ability to choose and discuss and consider all the options. So just want to be clear about that.
Right, and does not commit us to anything. The
Doesn't commit us to
legislator
anything.
can still act on this
Right.
and we can decline to use that.
It's a time-sensitive issue.
Right.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Okay, at this time, I'll open it up to the general public for some comments or questions. And as always, please come to the mic as we're taping this.
Hi, I'm Linnea Johnson, I'm in Bovee. I came to the board here a couple of weeks ago and I provided you guys with how to get community involved and that sort of thing. And I sent some other things as well, and I just wanted to make sure you all had received them. Did you guys receive them? Okay.
We did.
And then I was wondering if moving forward, because of all that, I think that it could prove to be a helper. And it's not meant as a hindrance. It's a helper to provide further input, information, some ideas, that sort of thing that can be considered by the board. So I was wondering if you as a board would decide if there could be a community planning committee that could parallel some of what you guys are doing with this jail task force. And I don't know if you've had enough time to look at it all because there was 24 pages worth, but I thought it had a lot of really good insight and good information from the DOC. But just wanted to know what your thoughts were on that going forward.
A lot of that you gave us, we did have in a separate binder that the sheriff had provided us. So some of that was duplicate, but there was some new stuff in there too. But yeah, it's all good information as to how to move this process along. And we're still, like Ben said, we're still at that point of trying to get to the public with the correct information and a consistent message. And so that'll be part of that package.
Okay, I would just like you guys to revisit that here in the next, as we turn the corner into the new year. I'll probably be asking it again.
Okay.
Because it would be nice to have that piece of that community planning involvement I think would really, really benefit. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
John Casper, 232343 Lakeview Drive. I guess the first thing I want to say is I want to thank Mr. Trunt, Mr. Snyder, and Mr. DiNucci for their due diligence in a very short time coming up with another option. They're both similar, but two more options, I guess. I understand that the original jail task force did look at the east, and I can be corrected if I'm wrong. I haven't seen the footprints on those and the cost of those directly. They might be all in the books there. I'm not real sure. But it's evident that in a very short time, these three gentlemen worked with the city and came up with what looks like or could be some really good ideas, and I really appreciate that. I understand that the Contigrity Group is above reproach. I've looked at the reviews and what they do, and they do great work and everything. I don't know how we got to the point where they were selected, if that was a bidding process or what happened, but in most things, that's what you look at to get the best price on something. I just hope that, and I have no doubt, they'll look at what you three gentlemen came up with here in all fairness, and because to me it looks like it would be a savings. I mean, I have 42 years of construction experience. Everything from outhouses to power plants to 1,000 wind turbines. You know, that don't make me no expert, but I have seen a lot. You know, the average wind turbine site was $415 million, you know. So there are, I guess where I'm going with that is, and it's kind of goes along with what Linnea was saying, we've urged the former jail task force and now this jail task force to get us involved. You know, I've said it several times, you're probably getting sick of it, but, you know, there's architects, engineers, laborers, millwrights, and you name it, iron workers to the stay-at-home dad or mom or whoever it might be. There's also, I mentioned one lady in town, one of the, she's a CPA and has a business very well respected in town. She mentioned she'd be willing to look at figures and things like that too. Because I don't pretend to know it all, that's for sure, despite what a couple of the gentlemen out here in the audience might think or say. But, and I know you guys don't feel you guys know it all too. We keep hearing there's 42,000 people in the county, and there's a lot of expertise from those 42,000 people. So I really would encourage you to reach out and get input from them beyond having these meetings and you giving us the input. And I really want to thank the board as a whole. Mr. Ives mentioned that I talked to him the other day. He gave me 3 hours of his time on the phone the other night. I mean, he's done that a couple times in the last month or so, and I can't thank him enough. I learned a lot from our discussions. We agreed and we disagreed on things, you know. But that's what needs to happen, I think. A lot of things have become confrontational. I don't think it should be a we against you or you against us thing. The last board meeting, that seemed to be what happened, and I don't want it that way, and I don't think anybody else does. We want the best facility we possibly can build for the most reasonable amount of money, which is, I think, is what you guys want too. I don't know anybody that doesn't want that. There's just one more thing that I wanted to add, and hopefully you guys would think about it, is I guess the question that needs to be asked to the board, will they all agree up front, maybe at tonight's meeting, that they will put in that whatever financing mechanism that they put in, the taxpayers will have the opportunity to vote on it. When the county wants to spend 30 to 70 million of our tax dollars, we should have the right to make that decision. I do not know anybody that does not think that we should not have that right to vote on it. I would hope the county board would make the commitment that they will allow us to vote on any financing they put forward. That should include not having to put a petition forward in a short 30-day period to get this to happen. I know that was asked to Mr. Walker. It seemed to be the two financing options are the sales tax and the capital expenditure. He said he didn't know too much about the sales tax, I believe, at the last meeting, or maybe it was the one before, and also about the capital expenditure in it as far as the petitioning end. But I don't feel that it should be put on us, the public, once you decide to say it is the capital expenditure, that we have to gather. I was told it was 10%, but I checked into a little more. I believe it is the 5%, which would come to 1,500 signatures. Then they have to get certified. That's going to cost whoever puts the petition together. I don't think we should have to be put out to gather those signatures and the expense of certifying those signatures when you as a board can make the commitment to us, we the taxpayers, to allow us to vote on whatever financial mechanism you decide to put forward to us. And I hope that that you would make that commitment to us. I don't think it's fair for us to have to go through that petition process when it's not necessary, because the board can make that decision. So again, I thank you for your time, and I thank you for this other option that you put forward.
Any other questions or comments? Terry?
Mr. Chairman and board members, my name's Terry Eddington. I live at 29627 McTavish Drive, Grand Rapids. And I just want to reiterate to the board and emphasize to you that the information that Lucas presented here tonight about the overall cost of operating an incarceration facility needs to be your consideration. And I don't always hear well, but what I thought I heard him saying is that something like 63%, this is from the National Institute of Corrections, of a jail facility over its intended lifetime of 30 or 35 years, about 63% is staffing cost. And construction cost over that period of time is only about 10% of the cost of operating a facility. So as you consider what you're going to do about construction, keep in mind that there are many implications of what you build in terms of the cost of operating that facility over the long term. Taxpayers are responsible for it all, not just the construction costs, but the total operation over the life of the facility. And you can verify the numbers with Lucas. I may not have heard him correctly, but I'm asking you to keep that in mind as you consider what to build, where to build, and particularly in relation to the court, because some of the costs of operating a facility has to do with moving incarcerated people back and forth to the court system. So thank you for your time and appreciate your allowing me to input. Thank you.
Terry? Any others?
Hi, my name's Nick Schuler. I'm an employee at Atchison Tire, just down the road. And I would just like to know if any of the local landowners have been talked about the county purchasing their property to build a jail. If that's been, I know that my boss and father-in-law, John Atchison, has not had a conversation with anybody about that. And I find it rather rude that no one can walk across the street just to ask their 2 cents about, would you sell, would you fight it? Kind of how that would carry out. So that's all I have to say, but thank you very much.
Anybody else?
I forgot, I was gonna mention one more thing if you'll indulge me. We keep hearing about the two options, and I know I talked about this, before at a board meeting and here. And I talked to Terry about it and Burl. Despite what everybody thinks, we seem to be getting a lot better as far as communicating. There was an option thrown out by a group, of cutting a percentage off of our budgets. The percentage that was thrown up was 1%. And with talking to Burl, we kind of threw some numbers together, and I'd forgot about, or it might have been Mr. Snyder, the IM Care takes, I think we have 150 million budget or somewhere in there, and IM Care is 60 some million of that or something, so you got to take that out of the equation. When we were doing some figuring on it, it looked like 1% would be around 850,000, I believe it was, a year, somewhere in there, just roughly. Mr. Walker, I'm sure, has all those figures in his head. So I'm not sure what the payment looks like. I think we threw out 40 million. I don't remember what it was. Was it 2.5 million a year or something, bro? We were kind of talking.
It was a 2.5 million for about a $70 million deal.
So it'd be
Per year.
substantially less. So even if it was 2 million, whatever, if you did that, you could take the 850,000 and put it on that. And it would substantially take down what the cost would be to finance. And I'm just throwing it out there because we have to look outside the box on everything, I think. Obviously, the three commissioners did that in a short time on another area to build on. And I hope that we'll be looking at that as an option too. I guess that's all I'd have to say. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chair.
Terry.
I think these are all great comments, and I think, I'll speak for myself, but I think I speak for the board too, that, we're dedicated to find any source of revenue that might buy down the total price of this. And I think a lot of you in the audience know that, we've looked at our other facilities and is there a potential there? The land came up tonight. We have a lot of tax forfeit land, some of which we probably could sell. We also have county-owned land that is not tax forfeit. And I think that's all, when you talk about thinking outside the box, those are all open discussions that have to be had. Every nickel's going to count. This is an expensive venture, and we know that, and we don't take it lightly. So we understand that, and we'll be as diligent as we can to examine everything we can to reduce that price.
And I would add to that, we have asked the land commissioner to look at the land inventory and consolidate when we can. We have a land classification, just got scheduled today, March something, where we sit down and look at the available properties and trying to determine if we sell or keep or whatever. So that'll be factored into our decisions this year.
Mr. Chair. I guess one thing, and we probably owe an apology to Atchison's Tire and all the businesses around here. We didn't, I'm as guilty as any of these gentlemen and or any other people who sat on the task force to begin with. No, we haven't walked across the street. Probably should have. I can tell you that we're going to have to walk across the street to the west here real quick, like. But if we do decide to go other ways, if we're going east, yeah, we're gonna have to talk to a lot of people. But we do apologize. We didn't mean to make you feel that way, and or John, I didn't mean to make him feel that way neither. So, yeah,
Thank you.
just so you're aware of it.
And David, just to add on to what Mr. Casper was bringing up, the,
Come to the mic, please, because it's taped.
usually not very hard to hear me, but the task force job wasn't really to go out and start soliciting the landowners. You want to be careful there, because when you're supplying options to the board, when you start to narrow the scope of what you guys are going to plan to do, that's when you start to approach landowners. If we would have went around here and lit all the grass fires in a time frame when you shouldn't be lighting grass fires, it wouldn't have been no good. Now, when Scott talks about cutting or looking at some of that stuff, we also have to remember, keep in mind the operational costs that we'll save just by not transporting anymore. There's a huge dollar figure that sits right inside my budget there right now that we're keeping from hemorrhaging on this out-of-county placement. And a lot of that can be refocused on the county's long-term commitments and what have you that's already built into the budget. So as we look at this, there may be some hurdles we have to overcome, but once the budget levels back out and you're able to commit some of those dollars that we've been using to out-of-county placement can be put towards bond buy-down and do stuff like that. Even if the fact there's a sales tax, some of that money can be recommitted or even used in resources that'll help offset some of the levy dollars. But I just want to remember that those are expenditures that we are having and being forced to pay that can be turned around and recommitted to our project.
Yeah, Nick, I might change that question from have we talked to John to do we have to talk to John? So, you know, as we now look at the options, it's like, we don't have to worry about talking to any of these people because this might not even be a feasible option. So, same sentiments as Bro. We apologize for the misconfusion here.
See, I too, we need to apologize, but I think the sheriff made a good point that, you know, it's, you gotta be careful in, you know, how you move forward. Again, you're gonna light a bunch of grass fires and create more issues than good. But, you know, the interesting piece about going west is that there is a willingness on the city to negotiate on their property, but the other two businesses are both for sale. So, not that that was intentional, but.
Okay, all right, thank you, everybody, for coming, and we'll, January 2nd will be our next one, 7 o'clock here.